So in part one, I took the case apart and kind of showed you what that clock is really made out of, I guess, and got it back together again. I'm happy with that part. And in this part two, I plan on taking the movement apart because I couldn't keep it ticking, and you could tell by even looking at the mainsprings that they were kind of dirty and probably needed cleaned and oiled also. So let's get on with the video, but don't forget to subscribe and give me a thumbs up. I appreciate it. So before we get on to the movement, GW sold this clock. It's the one I'm working on right now, not the exact clock. $77.06. And to ship to my place, it would be $42.26. So that shows you on this style of clock, it's an expensive clock for some reason. So getting back to the movement, this one here will be a little bit different than what I'm normally doing. You have your bell for the half hour, and of course the hammer will strike the gong on the hour. I already put zip ties on, and what I'm going to do is let the spring down on the zip tie to take the power out of the clock. I already got my fancy dancy feet on there, and what I normally like to do, you got your spring wire there, and if I can, I'm going to pop it out of the clicker so that way when I back up or when I go to wind the clock, we'll say, the clicker will move out of the way, and then I can go ahead and let it down without having to push the clicker back in order to do that. I think I'll get my smaller screwdriver and see if I can get in there, see if I can see what I'm doing. There's the spring right there, so it's out of the clicker, and I'll go ahead and do it to this one also. So now I should be able to start to wind this clock. The clicker should move out of the way, and then I can get it all the weight or pressure onto this good zip tie, not the cheap ones. This is a black zip tie. I'm going to move this out of the way so I have full control of this. Okay, all my pressure now is relieved onto the zip tie. I'll do the same to this one. Better wind it up a little bit. And it's not releasing. Did I fall back in? No, it should be. It's sitting on its side, the spring's sitting on the side of it. I guess I have to deal with this a little bit differently. As in, I'm still going to have to wind it up, to push it out of the way, then it should stay out of the way. Let's see, where is that clicker at? There we go. It's very sticky, so, but this was the side that the operated the hammer for the gong. So now I can put the foot back on. I've already taken my pictures, knowing this here shaft for the hands was pointing down, so that's how I took my pictures, so it'd be easier to see what the gears look like. Now what I plan on doing is taking the nuts off and trying to lift this plate up to leave the gears in place, so that way you can get a better picture of where the gears go. If that messes up, you have your side pictures to see just what the gears basically look like and what area they were supposed to be in. This bell had 2 nuts on it, so it wouldn't come off. Really dirty. This here, it might be a piece of brass. It almost looked like it was painted. So that's out of the way. So now let's go ahead and take our nuts off here so we can take it apart. Oh, and before I do that, I'd like to get this back off. Sometimes you'll have to take a razor blade knife and open that up so this will come out. And I already straightened the spring out, or the spring. And the reason why this got bent is because the bob was still on here, and more than likely the clock might have got turned upside down or whatever, and that caused the weight to come down and buckle onto the spring, and that's what bent it. And just checking. Anyway, let me get these nuts off and go from there. And I see there's a screw here besides the nuts, so that screw will probably have to come off also. So here we have a spring wire we need to take off. This here goes to the levers inside. That was just hooked around, but I think they wrapped it. Yep. So that one's free. Then we have another one here. I do believe, yes it does, it goes to the hammer. So it's a much heavier wire. Now we need to take that screw out and see if we can get this thing apart. I have a feeling, because this spring keeps letting loose a little bit more each time, that it might spring on us. Oh, I got one more nut here. Can't forget any of the nuts. Now it feels like it was stripped on there. Feels a little difficult coming off. like to remove this if I can. So we still have power in there. I don't want to damage that, so I wanted to get that off of there. So I think I'm going to let this thing wind down before I try getting any more off. The time side, it looks like it's doing good. Now I can try getting it off. Side acts like it's stuck on the spring. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's got some power in here because the gears are starting to push out. And much of it is, I don't know. There's some there. Especially when they're dirty, it seems like you can't get them to release all the way. This one might be having a problem because of the arm for the bell. Kind of snug. There we go. And the hammer for the bell. The hammer for this. And it had a spring wire coming up through the hole here. So, let's see here. Pop that back in place. Now if we want to, we can get a picture. Now, this is kind of odd. This here, I think was the spring. No? Just more levers that catches the warning pin there. Anyway, now that we got the plate off, let's get a picture so we can see the lines of where the gears are and whatnot to see if we're still on track, I guess we'll put it that way. So let's go ahead and take these out. Means this one has nothing blocking it. I'm going to go ahead and take this spring out first. If I can get it to come up. And sometimes it helps to remember which spring came off of which side. Now, this one came up and it wraps around this way. This one, when I get it off, it wraps around this way, so it wraps around the opposite way. And let's go ahead and take this side apart. It does look dirty. Very dirty. It's got a buildup of grease that turned into, or buildup of oil and dust that turned into almost a harder grease, I guess we'll call it. They're all very dirty. I'm not sure if you can see just how dirty the ends are or not. These two are what the wires that are on here. One's for the half hour, and one would be the one that triggers the hour strike. So this side, we got the hammer here, and I think I can get this off. I don't think it's attached to anything. And now that we have it that far, if you want, take a picture of your levers where they're sitting, because you might not remember when it should go on or how it should go on. So go ahead and take a picture of your levers sitting there. It's got the warning pin on it. That's pretty nasty. That there, the two pieces of metal sticking up, that would be what the hammer would be making the clock gong with. And I forgot that one, the wire wrapped around, looks like a nail head, but obviously is put there just for this. And then this here piece you lift up on this point here, because there's a hole in this gear and it just sets in there to hold this in place from sliding around. So you just lift up a little bit, turn it, and now you can just slide this out. And that piece looks like it's permanently installed there. Some clocks you gotta watch, because if it has the riser, sometimes they just come right out. But I can see two pins there. They go all the way through. So let me get this into the cleaner, and we're going to clean the springs separately. I took the screw out of there. It has a domed washer, just enough to hold this into place. And I would say, by the looks of it, this here needs to be turned until it unthreads. Maybe. I can't seem to get these out, and I don't want to. These are been the metal's been smacked in to hold the gear to the rod, and I don't think I want to mess with that. So I cleaned and dried it and everything else, so all the gunk is out of my way. This is the only bushing I need to work on, and let's get a hold of that gear. There, you can see it popping up and down. Otherwise, the rest of these all look to be, looks like the whole clock's been bushed at one time, just that they only got it once and then wasn't taken care of ever after, I guess we'll put it that way. Looks like maybe this bushing could use it too. So we'll mark that one. Otherwise, the rest of them just have a little bit of play, but nothing compared to this one and this one. I changed the bushing at the bottom. We have a little bit of end play. No, I don't have the bolts in, but I do have a little bit of end play. And now it turns beautifully in there. I had to use my diamond brooch to open the hole a little bit because the bushing I had was just a little bit too tight, and I had to make it so it'd spin nicely. I do have a little bit of movement up and down, which is a good thing. And so now we'll do this bushing for this gear. And there's the bushing I'm going to put on. And this one fits nicely, but after you've tapped them in, there's a good chance they'll be too tight, and it's a good idea to use the brooch to loosen it because you want no friction. You want it to spin nicely. I'm running low. Need to do some more ordering. I'm trying to get this plate off of the spring. The spring comes around this way, and so you should be able to back this up and get it to release. But sometimes they're pushed on there a little bit too far. Well, there's no such thing as too far, but you have to possibly get a screwdriver in there and back it off or pop it off that pin. There we go. Now I'm going to use mainspring lube on my spring for the clock. When you're looking to order, if you are the mainspring lube, they have different weights. I finally picked one that's in the middle of the road for what it does, different types of springs or whatever, because I wasn't going to have 7 bottles of different oils just laying around, not using them very much. So I got my zip ties back on. I had to put the plates back together with just the springs and of course the gear that goes with it. And what I did is I held this gear here as I wound it, and when I could, I put a screwdriver in through anywhere in here to just in case it decides to take off, and held this until I could get it wound up enough. And once it's wound up, this will come back and hit this plate to keep it from unwinding, and then you can get your zip tie back on. I did the same thing with this one. I held it, not that one, the main gear there, and I put the screwdriver in there, wound it up, and then let it come back against the plate to hold it in place. Got my zip tie on, and then I went ahead, because I had this on here to wind it with, and then I went ahead, once the zip tie was on there tight, took the screwdriver out and released the pressure back onto the zip tie, and now the zip ties are holding all the pressure. So now I can take my nuts off that are on this side, take it apart, and now I can put the gears all back where they're supposed to go, so we can get this thing running again. And I only put 3 nuts back on. The 2 main ones are right where the springs are, and this one's just to hold the plate down so it doesn't want to bow up or anything else. And so, like I say, now we can take these screws up, or the nuts off, and of course when you take this plate off, where the shaft comes through the plate, it's going to move, but in so many words, don't worry so much about that, because like I say, all the pressure is on our zip tie. So I don't have the hammer on yet. I don't have my springs hooked up yet, or wire springs for anything. I'm just bringing this a little bit closer to hitting where it needs to. Now this here is off a little bit. It's hitting right on top of the tooth. So right there, it's fallen in. Needs to be adjusted, like I say. What I'm looking for now is in here where that disc is. It falls, the lever inside here falls down into the disc, and now I have to have this warning pin close enough that it hits this wire lever here. And it's going there. So what I'm going to do is find my tools. I'm going to bend this just a little bit so it stops hitting on top of the gears. I get still not hitting down center. Right there it should shut off, but it didn't. So right there it goes down. Now, setting this is almost not right because we don't have our wires pulled so these bend the way they're supposed to. I just hit into the shaft. I'm going to fish all my wires out and get them hooked up onto what I consider the nail heads and whatnot. And this way we can find out for sure that this thing's turning off or whatever, as in the gong on this side, so it's working properly. So when this drops, you have to look in here and see where the lever drops on that disc right in there. And then when it drops, you pretty much need it just after it drops or in the center of that disc that has a cutout. And then you have to look at your warning pin over here, and the warning pin needs to be very close to this lever right here, because that's what stops the gong from gonging, because the warning pin will catch there. And the only way I know how to do it, if you're off, I have this loose. You can take it off, it doesn't matter because the other three are holding. And then you guys start separating your plate, and it's easier to take the fan off because the fan's touching that gear that you need to move that has the warning pin. Take it off, and then you have to spread the plate a little bit more to release this part of the gear so you can pull it back, because right here where the I forgot what they call them. Anyway, right where, let's just call it the gear down there, it's got to be pulled away from the one that is turning on it in order for you to turn this gear to get the warning pin closer to that pin, and then put it back together again and test it. I know it all sounds difficult. I might not be explaining it real good or anything else, but I'm trying. So I'm going to use this here because I don't have the spring hooked up. It drops down there, the warning pin caught and stops. So I'm happy with that. Now I can go ahead and tighten this nut up. I just put the screw in also, and I'm going to put the screw in to the adjuster, and which, remember, it had this domed washer, so that way it can move without being tightened up too tight. Well, I got the wire put back on for the bell. Had to take that screw out and loosen those two to separate the plate enough to slide that in there. And then, of course, the wire comes back around and just hooks on there. And I also wanted to mention, in which I should have showed it, but trying to remember as you're working on the clock, this does say Made in U.S. America. If you were to turn this plate over, it says it on the other side of this plate as well. And like I said before, it didn't get stamped very well. It looks like a .89, and I'm going to say a 0. So I already have the clock oiled up and it's ready to go. I need to put... No, it's not. This here is what goes in there. So I have to put this on. This here is the hammer for the gong. You just got to pay attention to your parts. I guess I'm getting too much of a hurry. I don't know. Anyway, let me... more than likely take that screw out, loosen these up so I can wheedle this into the clock. So on here, I always lube the paddle on both sides, and the reason for that is I don't want any friction, and it helps the clock run. In time, there's a chance it might start squeaking on you, and then it will possibly stop. I know cuckoo clocks are good for that. Like I say, you'll hear that squeaking sound. So we don't have it leveled, but we got the paddle now done, and that should make this clock run even better. Got that pushed back all the way. And there's a chance I might have to readjust this rod again. Or it's actually this one here is the one you'll bend Once you have it in the clock, have it leveled, and then get your even tick-tock going. And I still haven't taken the straps off yet. And the way to get those off, wind your clock up until they're loose, like this one here. That one's still tight. And you got your choice of cutting them off, which is probably the safest way for most people, and not reuse them. Or if you wanted, you could stick a razor blade in there where the tab is, on this brand anyway. They make them so, I guess, so you can actually push a button and get them to release, but I don't have those. But you can put a razor blade knife in there, carefully lift that tab up, and then you should be able to slide this through. But I suggest just cut them off. They don't cost that much. And then the bell, oh, I can't turn it, my fingers. So these I've cleaned. I tried the back feet first, and it came out a copper color. But this is not copper. This is all pot metal. And let's see. One of these, I tried a cleaner on, a polisher. It might have been that one there. This gold or copper color, or whatever you want to call it, is, I'm going to guess, sprayed on or baked on or something. This here is black looking, and so I didn't mind doing it, and I tried the polish on it, and it just comes out that, I'm going to call it a pewter color. So whether this is pewter, pot metal, more than likely pot metal. So I'm going to guess, if you want to try to get these to shine up good, like I said, this here's the antique look, but maybe the other people spray these with a light gold paint, a light coat of gold paint, to get them to look brand new again. Some of these are really filthy looking on the inside, and others don't look so bad. I mean, they're still dirty looking, but figuring how old this clock is, I guess I'd be dirty looking too when I'm possibly being waxed or a cleaner used on the clock and it just builds up. I did notice when I was cleaning these, I had to take a screwdriver in to the tighter areas because it was like a mud, I guess we'll say, or a grease or something that needed to be carved out of there before I could clean it. Anyway, I took all these and cleaned them just with the toothbrush and Dawn dishwash soap, and that's what you're going to get is what you see here. So it still has that antique look to it. I'm not going to spray these. I probably should, just to liven the clock up, but I kind of like the antique look to it too, I will admit. So I got the clock put back together. This did have two of these washers with the square hole in it that help hold the hands tighter, and I was able to take one off. The hands are still quite tight, and so that reduced it from, I call it friction myself. And now the clock's ticking beautifully. I'm busy with my small keys adjusting the speed of the clock to get it back to running the right time. Here you'll hear the bell on the half hour. And then the gong on the hour. To hook this up so you can hear it ticking, I just use a keyhole. This clock is a little bit warped. I know the desk isn't perfectly level, but I have two nickels under this side. I have I think it's a single strength glass underneath this corner, and that further corner I have something underneath it in order to level it. And I leveled it front and back, and I also leveled it this way before I tried getting the tick-tock evenly sounding. So you can see in there, looks beautiful as far as I'm concerned, nice and shiny. And let me move the hand again. And get ready for the bell to ring. And then we'll come and get the gong to do its thing. So this clock didn't come with the door. You can see there's a slice in the dial where you can put the hinge through and solder it in. And I went on eBay looking for a session door, and I bought a set of 3, and you can tell how really nasty these look. This here isn't the exact one, but I plan on unsoldering it later. Right now, the soldering gun I need to do some adjustments or something to get it hot enough to melt that solder so I can pull it straight out. And then I'll be able to put it in there and solder it on. And then of course I'm going to have to get a piece of glass, which you can see where the glass is crimped in there. and then the clock will be back to whole again. Like I say, yes, this is nasty. I haven't cleaned it or nothing, and I'll do that in a different video maybe. So now that the clock is done and ticking nicely, and also where the hands were, I only put in one of the washers because it was a little bit too tight, and that's normally how you would tighten it up to get the, normally it's a taper pin in there. I went ahead and used the nail they had. It fits fine, hands don't shake, so I'm quite happy with that. Don't forget to subscribe because it's free. And until next time, God bless.